joy. So the third Sunday of Advent features the celebration of joy. And what I think about when I think about joy in the holiday season, I immediately think about the shepherds, The shepherds that play such a major role on Christmas Eve. And they lived in a world that brokered in honor and shame. Again, you had honor if you were wealthy. You were viewed as something more than anyone else if you were wealthy, and you lived in a state of shame if you were poor. That's just the way things worked. And certainly, the shepherds would have been amongst the poor. They are at the bottom of the social scale, but yet they come in contact with the Holy Family and the understanding that they are part of this message of hope. Now, if you're a shepherd at this point, you're probably moving from some sort of feeling of despair and emptiness and transforming into a sense of joy. You move from shame to honor within a split second. And that's got to be pretty cool. It's got to be pretty powerful, I would think. And it is a rush. And if you have had that feeling of joy, you are going to want more of it, I think. Okay? But it might be a fleeting sensation. Something that is not always easy to duplicate, although we try. Years ago in our consulting practice, one of our clients was the New York City Rescue Mission. And I'm talking now about 9/11. And 9/11 happened, and about 6 weeks later, the mission had me come in to kind of guide them in some things. The mission was 6 blocks away from the World Trade Center. And so I get there in November, and so here's the story. So the rescue mission, we're dealing with homeless men, the dregs of Manhattan, as it were, okay? About 100 of them are living in the New York City mission. And on the morning of 9/11, what happened was the supervisor that morning was out in the street having a cup of coffee, enjoying this beautiful morning, and then sees in real time a plane go into the World Trade Center. And he thinks, wow, that's pretty wild. Well, then he sees another one go in. And so after that, the supervisor runs into the mission and he puts together a map, or he Xeroxes a map that would show from the World Trade Center to the mission. He called all the men, all the homeless men of the mission together, and he explained to them what happened. And he says, what you guys have got to do is you have to run in the direction of the World Trade Center. And you got these flyers. And people are going to need help sooner or later. So you go in there and you hand out these flyers and you let people know, just keep going 7 blocks and there's going to be help. And so what happened that day, about 700 people who were in the towers did come through the mission and were processed. The mission offered a 2-minute landline call to a loved one, food, water, spiritual direction, and all these types of things. And they processed over 700 people. And it was an amazing thing. And what happened that day, it was a little bit like the shepherds. The men of the mission went from the dregs of Manhattan to having this powerful experience of meaning, of purpose. I mean, this was huge. So then I go to the mission 6 weeks later, and the dust is still going. I mean, it feels like, I don't know what, but there's all kinds of dust in the air and the metallic smell and all this type of stuff. But I went to the blast zone there, or what do we call it? The ground zero, I guess is what it was called. Walked around and walked all around the area with a couple of the staff people just trying to get a sense of some things. And what I saw was people walking around in a zombie-like state, which is not unreasonable given what the community had been through. But when I got to the mission, the men of the mission were still on fire. They had experienced this extraordinary sense of meaning and purpose that they had never experienced before. And so that was a joy that stuck with them for a little while. Now, I trust we've all experienced some joy. Certainly a lion's victory can create a little bit of joy, right? We wouldn't mind a little bit of it this afternoon, we shall see. But here's the thing. To strive for joy might be a mountain a little too steep to climb. Yeah, it certainly is one of the fruits of life. It's a lovely thing when we have it. But probably, and maybe a more mature kind of reaction to this thing of life is to look for contentment. How can I feel this sense of contentment? And I've always argued a life well lived is a bittersweet existence. That's always in tension, that the sweetness of life is there, the bitterness of life is there. That's the reality of the life we live in. And to be sensitive to that and to feel those feelings keep us connected to the world around us. It's a good feeling. Another story, Mother Teresa. We all know the story of Mother Teresa and the amazing work she did with the poor in Calcutta. Now, Mother Teresa, when we talk about joy, she had very little of it. She had a few experiences in her life where there was a type of this ecstasy, charism thing, and it was lovely. But for the most part, she was empty, without feeling, for 40 years. And she would often say, I'm not doing enough. I can't please God. And she was empty all that time. Well, she's a saint now, right? So John Paul, when he understands what Teresa went through, 40 years of dryness, he said, that's a miracle that she could do this type of ministry with a sense of emptiness the whole time. I wonder if John the Baptist experienced joy. Certainly did in his mother's womb, right? When Elizabeth and Mary got together and John's in his mother's womb, and hears about Mary being pregnant, and the story is he leaps in his mother's womb for joy. So he had that experience. And yet, when he was in prison and he was visited by friends who would then bring him food, he wants to know if Jesus is really the one. And so he learns about all the things that Jesus is doing. He's healing people, he's giving hope to the poor, and all these types of things. And John's listening to this, and he says, this is great, but he's still in prison. And I think John, and for a long time, I mean, his disciples probably thought, if we think back to Isaiah last week, and the prophecy of a great king and this type of thing, they might have been expecting Jesus to be not only a great spiritual leader, but a military leader as well. What are you going to do to free us from Rome, But that never came to be, did it? And so John asked the question, is this the one? And I think he said, boy, that's great for everybody, but what about me, I think he hoped he'd be sprung from the jail, but of course he wasn't. So joy is fleeting, and I suppose that's why joy is joy. It's not something we always feel. Some might seek this sense of joy through drugs and alcohol. That happens, but quickly realize that's a fleeting proposition. It just doesn't work. Victory in sports produces joy, yet it is the defeat that most of the time people learn from. If you're an athlete, you learn more from defeat than you do from victory. So joy, in the end, is a special experience, but maybe it should not be the measure of a life well lived. If you don't have it a lot, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And maybe the season does put a little too much expectation on the feeling. But then again, we all have experienced the joy of the birth of a child, whether it's a grandchild, a child, a niece, or a nephew, this type of thing. We've all had some of that joy. And certainly, my friends, we can experience the joy that does come from the birth of that baby long ago in a town called Bethlehem. And it's that baby who leads us on the pathway to peace. And maybe, just maybe, in the end, the true gift of joy that we can experience is living into the peace that Jesus teaches us. Compassion, mercy, justice, forgiveness, and grace. And as we move into that and share it and receive it and give it, it is at that point that maybe that's where joy resides. Amen.